Chris Voss gave me a huge 1 year's worth of subscriptions on Patreon, and I'm grateful to him for bringing you today's video. Nekusar the Mindrazer versus Calix, Jyoti and Sophia. Well, there's no ramp there whatsoever. Demonic Tutor could get us into some ramp, but we need to get into a land to play better ramp as well. I'll take a free mulligan on this. Alright, that's looking a lot better, especially once we get into a wheel, which we've got a decent chance of doing in this deck, of course. We are second in the turn order, seeing a turn 1 wild growth. There is another land for us, so we'll go after a tricycle land. We're in a Grixis deck, so we do want to be making a land every turn. I think there's 37 in the list. I tend to run 35 to 36 nowadays with the lower curve on commander decks. But with the number of cards that we can draw in this deck, we should be able to make a land every single turn. Okay, an Orcish Bowmaster, that has flash, so we can get that out easily enough. Let's go for Volcanic Island into the Arcane Signet. And that sees us into a turn 3 Solemn Simulacrum, so we're doing quite nicely here. Saw Calix come into play on turn 2, by the way. Enchantress is a pretty rough matchup for a Grixis player. Cavern of Souls, we've got a decent number of counter spells in the deck as well, but that's mainly to protect our board as opposed to hurting other people's. Anok Guide, search for a basic land, put it into your hand. And Calix just going off here, played a Rampant Growth and a Sylvan Library, so Calix already at a 4-4 by turn 3, and goes after the Simic player. Makes a token copy of the Wild Growth, as you would expect this early in the game. So triggers Calix yet again, and a turn 4 5/5 Calix to worry about. Alright, Sheoldred the Apocalypse is tempting, but I'm just going to accelerate the mana here. We've got Sulphur Falls, so it'll be 6 mana available to us next turn, so we could go for Sheoldred and Orcish Bowmasters. And we've got a grip full of black cards, so we'll go after a basic Swamp here. Maybe it'll be a good idea to go for Toxic Deluge before we do anything else, like commit our creatures to the board. Realm Walker is going to name Dog, so this is Dog Tribal. Didn't realise this is a Dog Scout actually. Alright, activated on Reef the Vastwood at the end of the turn there, so put a plus counter on the Realm Walker. So trying to garner favour over here. Shigeki into play on turn 2, playing plenty of tap lands over here. And then it's straight round to the Sylvan Library player. These are some fast players. This makes a hell of a difference playing Magic Online. Usually I'm slowly losing the will to live. That is the restoration of a Ganjo, search for a Plains. You've gone down to 36, so it looks as though they've taken some life to Sylvan Library. 6 cards in the hand at the moment. And there is a Calix. If it comes in at us, maybe we will go for the Solemn Simulacrum. Azusa's Many Journeys after that can play an additional land. And Calix is now a 7/7. If it swings in towards us, we might chump with the Solemn, because we've got a decent number of board wipes in this deck. It's difficult for us to get going, because it costs a lot of mana for our commander in a colour, not pairing, a colour shard that doesn't ramp very well. So wipe the board once or twice in the early game and then get our more expensive stuff down. Anyway, down to 2 cards in hand, there is a Starfield Mystic. So a board wipe might really hurt this player. And yeah, the 7/7 comes in towards us, so we'll take the card draw and save ourselves some life. If we have the choice of taking 7 damage here, or 7 damage to a Toxic Deluge, then we'll obviously choose the latter. If we can get into another land or a wheel or something here, that would be good. Alright, Ancient Tomb is a nice piece of ramp. So let's see what we draw in here. An Urborg, and that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 mana potentially this turn. So we could go for Toxic Deluge and Sheoldred in the same turn, which, yeah, might be good. Ancient Tomb with Urborg, we don't have to take too much life to, so that's excellent as well. We've definitely got double black, and this player's tapped out, so it's not likely that this is going to get a buff. So let's reset the board, and that wipes everything out. The Starfield Mystic triggers for a plus counter, which isn't going to do anything after a board wipe. And then we're in for Sheoldred, see if it can eat any kind of spot removal. If it's going on Sheoldred, it's not going on our commander. So that's going to trigger at each draw. Our opponent loses 2 life immediately. But we are in need of a board wipe here, so getting some additional card draw from Nekusar is probably going to be a good idea. Sophia feeling safe to come down after the board wipe. Another thing we could have done last turn is hold off on the board wipe again, and maybe go for Midgame and throw out Orcish Bowmasters as a chump blocker for the Calyx. But if we'd taken damage from that, we'd be down a further 7 life here and be on 7 commander, which we have to worry about with Calyx, so I think it was worth pulling the trigger there. A Rampant Froggantua. It's a new one, haven't seen it played as of yet. +10/+10 for each player who has lost the game, and it does have trample. And I suppose on Magic Online it's likely that a player will get knocked out sheerly by scooping early, so this could be a very big 3 mana trample creature. Anyway, we get up to level 2 on these. You may discard when you do return a permanent with mana value 2 or less to play tapped. So they discard a Respite in order to get a Starfield Mystic and can gain 3 life from the Azusa's Many Journeys. Don't think they took any life to Sylvan Library there, they're still at 2 cards in hand. But it is noteworthy that Sylvan Library does count as card draw unusually, so probably didn't want to take even more to the Sheoldred. They might not have even looked at the additional cards on top of the library, because they have to draw them to look at them and then pay the 4 life to keep them. Anyway, Calyx into play again, and it does trigger itself because it's an enchantment. Then Ajani fells the Godsire, exile a creature. So, yep, that does eat the removal as we assumed it would. And that is permanent exile as well, so we're not going to see Sheoldred again. But we knew this early in the game. She wasn't going to last all that long. Another land for us. Let's get down the Urborg into our commander. And if we go for 2 life here, we can afford the Megrim as well, which isn't going to do anything for us this early in the game, but it's worth getting it out for when we do eventually get into a wheel or something. But we're down to 28 already, and Calyx is obviously a threat to us. We're getting ahead on mana. We've got the draw pain going, so Calyx wants to be refilling his hand and using the Sylvan Library to do it, so will likely be targeting us. Keeping the Scooby-Doo player at 7 cards in hand though, thanks to our Nekusar. And with no protection for our commander, we're likely to see more spot removal. This is the problem with going quite fast. Don't usually go this fast with Nekusar, to be honest. A Mowu. Plus counters. Can put additional plus counters on it. It does have Vigilance and Trample, making it a very good attacker and blocker. And then a means of protecting a creature, giving it indestructible if you have the heart to sacrifice the dog. Luckily against our opponent, Nekusar is a half decent blocker, so deciding not to swing him. At least with these players having not too much mana yet, we haven't seen too much ramp from them. At least it means that they have fewer mana to do something to us with. But there, as we assume, Nekusar getting bounced. So from now on we need to hold up the single mana for the Crystal Shard. And that does free the way for Calyx to come in at us. There's a Rampant Froggantua as well. So we're probably the arch enemy here, which is the thing that tends to happen with Nekusar. That's why I've got a decent number of board wipes in here, but obviously we need to draw into them. And then, did our opponent mill cards there? Yeah, I wasn't keeping track of their... Yeah, I think they had 5 lands previously. They've got some fetches now. Anyway, multiple fetches in the bin. The Shigeki went down to the board wipe. I think they just milled the Nissa and the Blossoming Tortoise. Sylvan Library free to get additional cards into hand now, but decides not to put life into it. I think they would take advantage there, to be honest. So now some Creature Sagas going to come into play, creating a Cat Warrior from the thing that exiled the Sheoldred. And these do exile and then come back as a creature, so they do enter and trigger the Calyx for additional plus counters. And next turn this thing will be target creature gains double strike until the end of the turn, so obviously want to hold up some form of blocking against the Calyx. Mesa Enchantress, see if they can play an enchantment into that. Yeah, if they had that in hand, could they have done that before these flipped? I don't think so. Yeah, it's after your draw step. So, okay, well at least we're not getting the Calyx swinging in towards us. Now has a Vigilance counter on it. So just piling in the commander damage over here, up to 10 now. Maybe the Crystal Shard is going to start looking elsewhere if he's worried about commander damage. So I wouldn't say no to a Damnation or something here. Okay, an Echo of Eons. Each player shuffles and draws 7. So let's go for Nekusar. Need to count up the mana first. Yeah, we've only got 4 mana available after the Nekusar, so we could make that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 2 mana Orcish Bowmasters and a tap land. And we don't put life into the Ancient Tomb this way. Oh, but actually we do want to be holding up mana for Nekusar, don't we? So we can tap this down for mana against the Crystal Shard if we want to. Orcish Bowmasters. I definitely want a blocker for that Calyx, so do we hold off on Orcish Bowmasters so that they don't point spot removal at us? Or do we maximise the amount of draw pain we're doing? Yeah, let's go after the Bowmasters here. We have to kind of stick to the plan, really, even if we are making ourselves a target. So let's see what creatures we can ping here. Would be good to go after the Mesa Enchantress. It'll just have to be a Cat Warrior, I think. Problem is, if we thin out Calyx's board, not only will he come after us, but we're making him less of a threat, which means it draws the ire of our opponents towards us, potentially. Now, let's see how big Mowu can become this turn. Nekusar does have our opponents draw additional cards, so that means Orcish Bowmasters triggers. So let's put a damage on Mowu, and that means that if it doesn't get a plus counter on it, we can block with the Orcish army, and that will trade. But starting the turn with 6 cards in hand. Making a knight, or is that the plus counters? They decide to make a knight with it. Can't afford the 5 mana enchantment at the moment. The Ozolith, probably a good thing to get into play if they're worried about losing the plus counters, although they don't have any in play yet. The 3/3 Mowu goes in down the middle. And a dog deals combat damage to a player, so create a food token and investigate. So now they've got plenty of means of plus counters on dogs they control. Never got a chance to play Sophia, but it seems like a fun commander. Anyway, I think we're best pinging the Selfless Saviour before we see it sacrificed and get plus counters on it and stuff. We'll make sure that our opponent can't give indestructible to things as easily. So in response, that is Mischievous Pup. When it enters, return a permanent you control to the hand. Alright, so just an excuse to get a dog down, really. They could have gone for the plus counters in response, but deciding to hold off on that can do it next turn, forcing them to use cards in their hand at least. And this is another 1 toughness creature that we can get rid of as well. So we've got the first opponent down to 20, thanks to Calyx swinging in over there as well. And there we see this commander for the first time. So all of them in play here. And no manlands at the moment, but obviously this does count as a land token. So getting the first buff, but they do have summoning sickness. And the Crystal Shard still held up, so probably going to hold off on getting a tap land out, because we don't want to lose out on the mana, because they can take advantage with this and bounce the Nekusar. Sylvan Library, did they decide to draw? No, that hasn't resolved yet. We'll put 1 damage onto the Mesa Enchantress, because if they do want to draw additional cards here, then we definitely want rid of this. Although, argument to be made for us leaving it in play so that they do draw more cards. But the Orcish Bowmasters up to a 3/3 at this point. Alright, they did go for the draw on the Sylvan Library. So we get a shock here. So do we go after the Mesa Enchantress? If they draw from this again, we can always ping it. So Starfield Mystic. They've got 2 copies of this, unfortunately. Yeah, let's go after the Starfield Mystic while we can. Suppose if we're not going to go after the Mesa Enchantress after all, then could have got rid of this dog after all. But the Orc Army is now a 5/5, which is a decent blocker for us. So successfully getting rid of the Mystic, making their stuff more expensive. Might be that they were eager to draw into removal though. Just need to hope that they don't get some double strike onto this as well as trample. But pointing the double strike at the 3/3. So if they swing this in towards us, I wouldn't be against blocking it, to be honest, just for the sake of giving them fewer creatures. And Asia Escape Valhalla. Exile a permanent from your graveyard. Gain life equal to the mana value when it enters. So they do draw a card. Now, do we get rid of Mesa Enchantress, or do we get rid of the dog? Because these dogs are going to be a big threat next turn with multiple plus counters on them. Let's thin the herd there if we can. Or thin the pack would be a better phrase, I suppose. So we are, of course, allowing our opponent to draw additional cards with the Enchantress for our own gains of draw pain. They are going to gain a decent amount of life here, potentially, though, if they decide to exile the 5-mana Saga. And they did, so Ajani fells the Godsire, and when do they get to replay this? Return it to the hand on Chapter 3. So we've got a 6/6 Orc Army to the 8/8 commander. We're not likely to keep up on power and toughness with Calyx. Not unless a few turn cycles can go around anyway. Alright, Predatory Impetus. And they're trying to goad the Sophia, another card draw. So do we get rid of the land creature? Alright, and they decide to scoop, like we said. So instantly buffs this up to a 13/13 with trample, which is not good for us. So let's get rid of the Mesa Enchantress. Do need to ban that player for quitting there actually. Absolutely zero tolerance for people doing that now. So let's see how the attacks play out here, if at all. Just really hoping that we can get this Echo of Eons down. Even if it gets countered, we should be able to flash it back next turn. Yeah, a lot of attacks coming in at us, as you would expect. So some spirit tokens come down as well. So now we take less damage from the double striker. It's a good job our opponent got rid of that Sheoldred so early, because we'd be gaining a lot of life on the next few turns. Go through to blocks. I think I want to keep the Orcish Bowmasters in play, because it makes a big chump blocker for us. Like I said before, could trade with this, so that we don't have to worry about it again. And we also get to keep the army. It's more commander damage I'm worried about. Taking 14 damage if we block the green creature. It'll be 2 less damage otherwise. Yeah, we'll trade out with the Saga while we can. So untapping 3 lands with 2 cards available. And they do have double mana on the enchanted lands, of course. So I don't think we're destined for this game, but hopefully we can land the Echo of Eons without our commander getting blown up or anything. And if we can get at least 1 wheel off this game, I'll be happy no matter what the result. Calyx has us down to 11 and triggers when it hits us and gets a copy of this to gain some more life. So exiles underneath that the Predatory Impetus. So still at 41 life thanks to all the life gain. We'll see if this player is still looking in our direction. Maybe because we're at such a low life total, they'll just try and take us out and then fancy themselves in a 1v1. And it might be that they try to counter the Echo of Eons because they've got 6 cards in hand and quite like them. Alright, well, we just drew into lands there, so we've only got one thing we can try and do here. I'll play out the basic as opposed to the Underground Sea, because I can't remember. This is an old deck that I've updated a little bit, and I think I've got some duels here that care about 2 basics, so I'll get that into play. This is an Underground Sea with Urborg anyway. Anyhow, an Echo of Eons. Do we pay 2 mana with the Ancient Tomb? I think we do. I wonder in multiplayer if I should have the either the Basilisk Collar or the Shadow Spear. Basilisk Collar with something like Orcish Bowmasters would probably be good actually. We do tend to get targeted a lot, like I said before, with an Nekusar deck, so yeah, gaining a bit of life with a Basilisk Collar could be a good include. And if this lands, we're about to see why we end up with a lot of hate towards us. Looks as though the Simic player does have something for us, although he might be just playing a spell. There's a mana drain of all the spells. So we'll just have to go for the flashback. We're not going to win this game anyway, so we'll continue to hold up mana for the Crystal Shard and flash back the Echo of Eons. So how many Orcish triggers do we have there after that lands? Of course it's 2 lots of 7, isn't it? So 14 is 9. Can get rid of this as well, but we've still got the 13/13 to worry about. Anyway, oh, and there's Nekusar triggers as well, of course, so that's 7. 19 minus 7 means we put 12 over here. So yeah, let's do that, because I do believe that that 13/13 is going to swing in at us. So yeah, we have to put 12 damage on here, and we can at least come second place this game. If it was a paper game of Magic, then what I would probably do is say to this player, are you going to do anything to me? Are you going to attack me? And then he would have to agree at this point and start sending his stuff in towards Calyx, at which point I would start to focus on Calyx's board and free up the frog to go in over there. But not very easy on Magic Online to do politicking like that, so just have to do the best we can. Let's take down a spirit and another spirit, because our life total is teetering and you never know, these things might get buffed. And I made the mistake on Magic Online. You've got to be careful with which triggers you yield to. Doesn't look as though the client is struggling yet, but I wouldn't have auto yields on here if I'd remembered. When you get lots of triggers, it's best to go through quite a few of them one by one. So it got rid of the Nekusar ones. Alright, so managed to get him down to 0 exactly, and see how long we can last Didn't go for the spike play of bouncing Nekusar there. So we've still got the Brainstorm held up. And thanks to us not going for the Underground Sea previously, we've still got it in the deck, so we don't even have to go for a tap land if we don't want to. We can survive a turn. It might be that something like the Incendiary command can have our opponent discard cards and take a lot of damage to Midgame. Unfortunately, we just refilled our opponent's hand, so don't imagine we're surviving here. The Orc army is a 21-21 as well, which might hold off the Calyx. Didn't get into any free counter magic, of which we have a couple in the deck as well. And there we go, a Stroke of Midnight goes on to the Orcish Bowmasters. Suppose we can try our luck and see if we've got any free counters. So we'll grab that Underground Sea, play the Brainstorm. Even if we get into a Fierce Guardianship or a Force of Will, do we even, well, doesn't matter now, but do we even go for that? Or just dump some lands on top? And they do. I'm guessing that they don't have anything in hand, that's why they wanted rid of the Orcish Bowmasters, because they want to draw cards and look at more stuff with Sylvan Library. I'm guessing we just wheeled them into a worse hand. Well, not a worse hand, they hardly had any cards, but nothing of relevance. Either that or they're just setting themselves up against another board wipe. So this time it's level 2 twice on this, number of plus counters equal to the mana value of the exile card, so buffing up Calyx, see if it can get up to a 21-21. Not quite, a 19-19, although there's a Rogue's Passage, so yeah, that's us done. So Rogue's Passage on the Calyx. We got to wheel at least, that's what I said I wanted to do, got to take out a player. If the other player had stuck it out, I wonder how it would have affected the game, because we would have seen 7 more cards there, with the Orcish Bowmasters in play. But I think the Calyx was always going to swing in towards us for unblockable, even without the other player, so might have affected the middle deck here, in that we wouldn't bother taking him out if there was going to be another player left for us to worry over as well. So players scooping like that does affect the outcome of games, not just for us, but for other opponents as well. Had a Botanical Brawler, Heroic Intervention, Citizen Champion and Starfield Mystics, so even if we'd had the board wipe, Heroic Intervention likely could have saved them. We know that we were drawing into a couple of lands, and there was a Wheel of Fortune there as well, which likely would have had us, yeah, we would have tutored for that most likely. Dockside Extortionist is a lot of mana next turn, tutor for a wheel that involves discard, or maybe we would have used the Incendiary command, but the Demonic Tutor is a guarantee into a wheel. So yeah, maybe would have wheeled into a wheel, and then could have got even more damage off, so could have won next turn, potentially. But our opponent had the means of unblockable as opposed to trample, so it was a good game. Hopefully you all enjoyed the revisit to Nekusar after all these years as well. Big thank you to the patrons for their support of the channel. I'm tribalkai. Thank you for watching.